Hi, good morning, everybody. A great welcome to all of you who are already joined the webinar. We're seeing a number of other people still joining in, and I was just giving them a minute or so to join the audio for the webinar. While they're joining, we will go ahead and get started with the introductions and the housekeeping, etc. So today's webinar is being brought to you by Okloa and Swift Kanban from Digite, and the topic, which I think is a very interesting topic, teaching and coaching agility without going down the rabbit hole of agile methods. I think all of you are going to find it very interesting, given the number of methodologies, different processes and definitions that we hear about in today's environment. I think it's a great topic that we have got here from Patrick. Let's get started with some of the housekeeping. So we'll start with some introductions, and I will give you a quick 2-minute overview of Digite Swift Kanban. If some of you have not heard about us, you might find it useful, and I invite you all to connect with us later on for any further information that you might need from us. And then, of course, I will hand over the session to Patrick for his talk on the main topic of the day. And after the session is done, we will have hopefully a very good Q&A session. Again, based on the topic that I think we should have a number of questions for the session today. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce and I should mention one thing, that some of you already asked the question earlier in the just now in the Q&A. That we are recording the webinar, and we will make the recording available after the webinar, so you don't have to worry about taking notes, etc., etc. Please do ask questions. We will take the questions via the Q&A box that you will see on the right side of your screens in the GoToWebinar panel. Just enter it at any point in time. We will take the questions at the end of the webinar once Patrick has finished his session. And again, we look forward to your questions and to a good spirited discussion at the end of this session. So Patrick Steyaert. Patrick is the founder, principal coach, and trainer at Okloa, and I will give you a little bit more introduction about him. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm co-founder and senior vice president of marketing at Digite. And I'm very, very honored to be doing this session today with Patrick. Patrick and I go a long way back. We have been meeting since 2011 or 12, I think, and it's been just great to hear him talk, share his knowledge about various agile methods, Kanban, and all of the things that he's doing in recent years around discovery Kanban and customer Kanban, etc. Just to give you a little bit more information about Patrick, he's pragmatic agile business coach, and he's coached in both technology topics as technical topics like Kanban, etc., or also on general organizational transformation and business consulting. Really helps to create a deeper understanding of agility by resolving frictions, and I think today's topic again will be somewhat of play on that. He's the creator of Okloa Flow Lab, which encourages agile thinking by making use of business simulations. His research, his work, his writings on upstream customer and discovery Kanban, and looking at the end-to-end flow of work throughout the organization. That's I think really fascinating. I have been a product manager at Digite for a very long time, and it has been a particular interest to me because I also felt that there is a lot of work that happens upstream of your normal focus, and Patrick has really captured that very well with the work that he has done in this field. He's a regular speaker at international conferences, and of course he's a Brickell Key Award winner in 2015. Before I hand over the session to Patrick, let me just give you a quick overview of who we are, Digite. So we have been a pioneer in the web-based SaaS applications for a long time. We headquartered in Cupertino, California. Some of you might be familiar with this small city in the Bay Area. We are, as we like to say, we have Apple in our backyard, and it's good company for us. We have more than 750,000 users at this point of our products across the world. And our products, of course, cover Lean Kanban, Agile application lifecycle management, project portfolio management, that domain. And of course, Swift Kanban is our flagship Lean Kanban product. Just a quick word about Swift Kanban in case some of you have not heard about it. It's a very powerful enterprise portfolio Kanban capability tool. Majority of our customers tend to be in the technology space. Software and IT customers make up probably about 70% of our customers. But we do have a number of others who use us for other business functions, whether it is marketing or legal or HR or procurement, etc. We have a variety of customers around the world do that. Advertising is another one. And so it can be used for multiple such purposes. It also is very popular for personal Kanban users, and we have in fact some templates in our product that help you do personal Kanban of a variety of situations that you might have for in your personal life. And of course, one of the key things that Swift Kanban is really known for is some of the analytics and the metrics that we provide out of the box, which a lot of our customers appreciate because of its range and depth of the analysis that the tool provides. Just the last slide here on some key customers that we have, and you might see that we have customers around the world, actually customers both in the technology as well as in the non-technology world, and using us for both IT as well as non-IT purposes. So just a quick introduction. I'm going to hand over the session to Patrick. And Patrick, a very, very warm welcome to you for doing this session. Thank you so much. And let me go ahead and make you presenter.
Thank you, Mahesh.
And there you go.
Perfect. So you should see my screen now, right?
Yes, I'm seeing the, yeah, there you go. It's in the presentation board now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you, Mahesh. I'm glad to be here for this session. So as Mahesh already mentioned, most people know me of my work in upstream Kanban, customer Kanban. This is somewhat of a different topic that next to the upstream and customer Kanban, we've been working, me with my partner Rutger Kanban, we've been working on Okalawa Flow-Up, which is a simulation environment where people can experience agility firsthand. And the feedback that we almost consistently get on Flow-Up is that people say this is like an environment where we experience agility without having to go into the details of Agile methods. So conveying Agile thinking without having to go into all the elements of Agile methods. Now that inspired me to start building this presentation on what does that mean. Is that even possible to start to train and coach agility without actually going into the or agility first before the Agile methods. We feel that there's quite some need there. We all kind of experience the cargo cult aspect of Agile methods, and then it does show the importance of maybe going more into agility before going into the Agile methods. So the background, of course, is the success that Agile has in the market. So we're quoting a survey here showing that 94% of organizations are practicing Agile. I think that confirms with everybody's experience that most of the organizations have some experience with Agile or practicing Agile. For many organizations, business agility is a strategic topic. Maturity or experience with Agile is growing. The percentage of teams that are using Agile is growing, and organizations do report success with Agile projects. A witness of the witness of that success is not only in the numbers, it's also in the fact that while Agile started in software development in IT, today people are not just talking about Agile development anymore, they're really talking about business agility. And as I said, agility has become a point or a topic on the strategic agenda. So when we're talking about business agility, we're talking about engaging the whole environment, the whole organization, and not just the IT or the software delivery team or the software development team. It's engaging the business, the customer, engaging the end user. To sum it up in one sentence, it's about creating value through meaningful work. Engaging the entire organization. So it's a strategic topic. So part of the engine behind the success, or what fuels the success of Agile in the market, is the bandwagon effect. So it's a self-reinforcing loop where organizations see that their peers are adopting Agile, and because their peers are adopting Agile, they say like, okay, we must adopt Agile also. And obviously, the more people say, or the more organizations say, we must adopt Agile also, they're also adapting it. So this is a self-reinforcing loop. This is very typical for the transition from an early adopter market to the early or late majority markets. In the majority markets, organizations adopt a certain technology or a certain method because others are adopting it also, and that feeds the success. Success breeds success in this case. That feeds the success of Agile in the market. So that's the positive side of it. The negative side of it is that because of this bandwagon effect, because of this kind of copycat behavior, organizations are adopting Agile as a recipe. We see that one of our peers or our peers are adopting certain Agile method. So we and we see them being successful with that, and then so we try to copy that success, and we try to we implement that Agile method as a recipe. So even going further, when the why if there's no deeper understanding of why a certain recipe works or does not work, then there's a danger of that recipe becoming a dogma. So, and in the Agile community, this has been termed as the cargo cult. So a little bit just copying the something out of context, copying a certain method out of context, even if the context in which you're copying the method is a different context, and hoping to be successful with that. The logic behind this type of behavior is a self-sealing logic. So it's kind of the logic of where success is guaranteed. So we see that other organizations are successful with Agile, so the benefits of Agile are clear and unquestioned. So rather than thinking about Agile as solving a particular problem for the organization, it's the biggest question becomes not how do I solve the problem of my organization. The biggest question becomes how do I implement Agile, right? Because implementing Agile is quite a challenge. Right? So the emphasis, the focus shifts from solving a problem to implementing a solution. And then we can declare success when we have actually implemented that solution, because just the fact of implementing that solution, implementing Agile, is perceived as very challenging. So being able to overcome that challenge is declared a success, and that's to a large extent the type of success that can be heard from the market. Large organizations that have succeeded in to a certain extent implementing Agile and then declaring that a success. Now the question is it really such a success? Is it really such a success when a large organization implements Agile and then in the process of that needs to fire a whole lot of people? Is it such a success when a large organization implements Agile and in the process of doing so the customer service deteriorates? So we can question maybe to a certain extent that success. The effect that we see is or a little bit the counter reaction to implementing Agile as a recipe, or this dogmatic thinking about Agile is the pragmatic approach, where people say, we'll look at Agile just as a toolbox. We will implement the things that work. Now, again, that's not really a success in the sense that Agile is much more than just a toolbox of practices. It's a system. It's a system of practices that are governed by a set of principles, driven by a set of values. It's not just a set of individual practices. So if we often see this type of reaction in organizations, and again we can hardly call that a success. Another phenomenon that we are seeing is the islands of agility. As a part of the success, we've seen quite a growth of Agile methods, and that has led to quite a fragmented landscape of Agile communities and Agile methods. Now, having such a landscape on one side is having diversity is good, is positive. So on one hand, we can see that as a very positive thing, but we do need to recognize that today the landscape is very fragmented, to a certain extent, leading to some method wars, maybe some wasteful discussions, maybe some confusion for people that are trying to adopt Agile. An obstacle to sharing learning and sharing knowledge, and for me, maybe even more important, that fragmented landscape is often also reflected in islands of agility in the organization. I often come into organization where we need to organize a workshop, and then a cross-section of the organization is present at the workshop, and then at the start of the workshop they present themselves, and then we see that some part of the organization say, well, we're doing Scrum or some kind of safe, and then another part of the organization is saying we're doing Kanban. If we moved into IT operations, they talk about DevOps. the business itself is doing some variation on holacracy or sociocracy, and then the people that are running the digital platform are inspired by lean startup or lean UX type of methods. So we see this kind of islands of agility also reflected in the organization, and at worst it actually reinforces the organizational silos that we actually want to break down if we want to talk about business agility. So again, not maybe not the success that we hope for. Another phenomenon that we see that goes along with this is that in order to sustain agility, organizations need sustained coaching. So agility is only sustained when the coach is present, and so it's when the coach is not present anymore, we see the initiative of agility or the agility stagnating or even regressing. So again, not a success that we might hope for. Overall, we may talk about in quite a few cases we may talk about a revolution that is not a revolution. So just like in the quote, if we tear down a factory, but the rationality with which that factory was produced is left standing, then that rationality will just simply produce another factory. If we destroy a revolution destroys a government, but the rationality behind that government is not destroyed, then that rationality will just simply produce a copy of that previous government. In terms of agility, if we change the practices, if we tear down the practices and we change the practices without changing the underlying thinking, then this is not a very sustainable form of agility. If we think about it in terms of change, and we visualize what the previous slide, then we can talk about plan change as we do some action and we create some outputs. So we plan some changes and then that change produces a number of outputs, outputs in terms of teams that are performing a certain set of practices. Obviously that is not a very resilient type of change. So in the community we have evolved, and many people have said like, yeah, but it's not producing outputs. We need to produce outcomes. So that's the evolutionary type of change. So our change needs to be driven by the outcomes. But if we go one step further, then even that is not sufficient as a form of sustained change. If the change is not fundamentally challenging the thinking, if it's not fundamentally changing the thinking of people, of the organization, then that change will not be resilient. The change will not be sustained. So the reasoning behind it is that yes, we may have some change that is producing some outputs, that is producing some outcomes, and our change may be driven by those outcomes. But if the thinking is not fundamentally challenged, if the thinking of the people is not fundamentally changed, then those outcomes might be only temporary, or those might be outcomes that are only very local. So for example, a lot of agile change is driven by faster, better, cheaper. Yeah. But faster, better, cheaper is only one, is more of a form of agility that is associated with development, not necessarily with business agility as a whole. So in order to have resilient change, change that that can withstand a little bit of disturbance and disruption, thinking really must be challenged. Now the question then becomes is, what do we mean by thinking here? Surely if we implement Scrum or Kanban or SAFe or Lean Startup and we're driven by outcomes, surely the thinking of people that have been involved will have changed. So the question is, what do we mean by thinking here? And then that's the first question. And the second question is, can that thinking, rather than having to wait for the long process of doing the change and then by the change influencing that thinking, can we shortcut that and make that faster by teaching the thinking itself and coaching the thinking itself as a basis to support change? So those are the two questions that I want to answer. Now, first of all, if I talk about thinking, I'm really talking about understanding, having a deeper understanding. So what do I mean by that? When do you understand something? Well, you understand something when you know that if you do something, you can predict. Well, if you have a certain cause, you can have an idea about what the effect is. So you know that if you're doing something, then something else will result out of that. So in other words, a deeper understanding means that you have some idea about cause and effect relationships. And then influencing, challenging that thinking means that you challenge the thinking about the cause and effect relationships. It means that first of all, it means that you might need, you challenge the type of cause and effect relationships that you take into consideration, and so that you may need to take other cause and effect relationships into consideration, but also fundamentally maybe also challenging how you think about cause and effect relationships when we talk about agility. So let me make that, that's quite conceptual. Let me make that a little bit more concrete. So if we talk about the traditional mindset, the mechanistic thinking that underlies traditional management, then the type of cause and effect relationships or the type of elements that that is composed of or that is taken in consideration is things like division of labor, capacity utilization, resource efficiency. So that's the type of things that are taken into consideration, and the causality that is that underlies the mechanistic thinking is a linear causality. And so if we want to do an analysis of resource efficiency and we want to look at why maybe our resource efficiency is not as we hoped for, then we're going to look at the root causes, and we might find root causes in terms of maybe our division of labor. Something wrong is wrong with our division of labor. Maybe we haven't split the tasks in a way that is optimal, or we might find root causes in the capacity utilization. So we might not be fully utilizing our capacity for one reason or the other. So we talk about root causes, we talk about linear causality. And then if we want to optimize our resource efficiency, then what we're going to do is optimize, locally optimize for one of those root causes. For example, if we want to optimize our resource efficiency, we're going to optimize our capacity utilization. And if we want to optimize the capacity utilization of an organizational unit, then we're going to optimize the capacity utilization of the teams in that unit. And if we want to optimize the capacity utilization of a team, we're going to optimize the capacity utilization of each individual. So local optimization. So this is the type of cause and effect relationships, cause and effect reasoning that you can expect in a traditional management system. So moving towards Agile. So Agile recognizes, on the one hand, a completely other set of factors. So rather than talking about resource efficiency, we talk about flow thinking. Rather than talking about division of labor, we talk about self-organization. Rather than talking about planning and predictive control, we talk about active learning. So we consider a completely other set of practices, elements. But not only that, Agile thinking is characterized by the fact that we recognize that these different elements, flow thinking, self-organization, active learning, are not standalone elements, and that there's no linear causality between those elements, and that flow thinking influences our self-organization, and that self-organization influences our flow thinking, and that it's not about optimization, but that it's about, as a consequence of that, it's about managing trade-off. We understand that if we optimize our resource efficiency, then that might have an effect on our flow efficiency. So it's not about finding an optimal solution, it's about managing trade-offs. And real improvement is not just trading off one for the other, but real improvement is about really breaking the trade-off in terms of having both resource efficiency and as well as flow efficiency. Now, the reason why I stress, or the reason for this presentation actually, is when we talk about we need to teach Agile thinking before Agile methods, is if you look at this picture, then you can recognize that probably your method or the methods that you're familiar with emphasize one element over some of the other elements. Some methods may emphasize more flow thinking, other methods might emphasize more self-organization, and then still other methods might emphasize more active learning. And it's this different focus that often leads to quite some method wars or method discussions. My strong belief here is that true agility is recognizing the fact that each of these elements are causally connected to each other through self-reinforcing loops. Now, I will go a little bit deeper into that to explain that a little bit more, because I think that's it's fundamental. So I'll go a little bit deeper and show a little bit what we mean by that in the rest of the presentation. So if we're talking about influencing thinking, we're talking about gaining a deeper understanding and changing your understanding about cause and effect relationships, gaining a deeper understanding of how flow thinking influences self-organization, how that influences active learning, and how you can better manage trade-offs. Now, the way we're going to go a little bit deeper into that is through system diagrams and some. I don't want to scare people off, but we're going to show a little bit of the causal relationships, just to give you a sense and a feeling of what it's about. And we're going to do that in quite a rational way. Now, I want to emphasize that it is not just rational. If we're talking about challenging thinking, challenging the rational brain is clearly not sufficient. People think with their guts, with their intuition, and so we clearly need to challenge the intuitive brain. A lot of what we're talking about is intuitive, and challenging the intuitive brain is a little bit more difficult because it's driven by the intuitive brain, driven by experience. And so if people don't have the experience, then obviously they don't have the intuition behind it. So you've got a little bit of a bootstrap problem here. I'll talk a little bit about the role of simulation at the end of the presentation. So we see a big role for simulation here, to develop that intuition. Now, because it's a presentation, I will need to speak a little bit more to the rational brain than I would like to, but I hope it does give a flavor of what we're talking about. So let's start with one part of the way we create value through meaningful work is by organizing work. And so we've got a visual system here, and so it visualizes to a certain extent how we organize work. So at the top we see a workflow, the different steps that the work goes through. We might see work in progress. We might see expedited work. We might see work that is blocked for some reason, and we might see people that have been assigned to work, and then also because there's a time between starting work and finishing work, which we call the lead time. Sorry. So if we think in terms of systems, then we can think this in terms of of work as a flow system. In the central in this flow system is the work in progress. So that's our bucket of water, and then the faucet where we pour water into that bucket is the starting of work, and then the faucet that where water is drained from our bucket is the finishing of work. So it's a very simple flow system. So we can think of work in terms of a very simple flow system. So if I represent that through a cause and effect diagram, so if I look at it from the standpoint of causal relationships, then we have an arrow from starting work to the work in progress, means that there's a positive causal relationship between those two, meaning that the more work we start, the more WIP we have. The less work we start, the less WIP we have. So that's a positive causal relationship. We also have an opposite causal relationship from finishing of work to the work in progress. So that means that the more work we finish, the less WIP work in progress we have. The less work we finish, the more work in progress we have. So that's an opposite relationship. So that's fairly straightforward. Things become a little bit more complicated when we take in consideration reinforcing and balancing loops. So if I have a simple flow system of representing births and deaths in a population, then there's a reinforcing loop between population and births, meaning that the more people I have in my population, the more babies, so the more births that we have. So that reinforces our population. Now, if there wouldn't be no balancing loop to that, then that would mean that my population would grow exponentially. Now, luckily, so to speak, we have a balancing loop. The balancing loop is the bigger our population, the more people will die, sadly enough. And so that drains our population. Okay. So we have a reinforcing loop and a balancing loop. So we can take into consideration in our simple flow system also reinforcing and balancing loop. So what are the reinforcing loops that start work and that create more work in progress, and finishing work that drain the work in progress? So what are those? So again, if we look at our organization of work, we can see that sometimes work gets blocked. Now, if my work item gets blocked, that means that I become idle. And I can use that idle time in two ways. I can use that idle time to start new work. So that would be a reinforcing loop, or I can use that idle time to finish work, and that would be a balancing loop. So shown graphically in our causal loop diagram. In the central part, we still have our flow system, finishing work, work in progress, and starting work. But now we have an arrow to the right showing that the more work in progress that we have, the more chance that we have that work can get blocked. Now, if work gets blocked, I become idle. Right? My work item gets blocked, so people become idle. So there's a relationship, a causal relationship between blocked work and idle time. The more blocked work, the more idle time that we get. Now we can use that idle time in two ways. We can use that idle time to start work, or we can use that idle time to finish work. And that would mean that, and that shows our reinforcing loop and our balancing loop. So without any additional factors, you would expect a system that is in balance, where it's balanced around a certain level of work in progress. Now, this is not without external factors. There's external factors that come into play. And let's start with seeing how the external factors come into play when we start from on a mechanistic mindset. Remember the mechanistic mindset in terms of we want to improve our resource efficiency. We do that through division of labor and capacity, improving our capacity utilization. So division of labor and capacity utilization show up as constraints in our cause and effect diagram. Capacity utilization is a constraint on our idle time. If we want to have 100% capacity utilization, that means that this constrains our idle time to 0 idle time. So that's a constraint. So if we look at our loops, so if we have blocked work and our idle time is constrained by 100% capacity utilization, it means that we really need to either start work or finish work. Now, the finishing of work is constrained by our division of labor. I can only finish work that has been assigned to me. And if there's no, if the work that has been assigned to me is blocked, then I cannot finish any work. So that means that I need to start new work. Okay. The result is that the reinforcing loop, under the pressure of our mechanistic mindset, our reinforcing loop is much stronger than our balancing loop, meaning that we have an increasing or a high level of work in progress. Maybe just to say that a little bit more intuitively, under the mechanistic mindset, if work gets blocked, it means that that's an opportunity, because if work gets blocked, people become idle. It's an opportunity to start new work. So that characterizes, or that shows the effect of resource efficiency on our flow system. Now that in itself is just one effect. There's multiple knock-on effects. There's multiple knock-on effects which actually make the situation much worse. On the right-hand side, we see that if work gets blocked, then obviously we need to do additional work to unblock the work. Just to give a simple example, if work gets blocked, so I need to put the work aside, there's additional work to be done, induced work to be done, to actually take up the work again. If I'm interrupted, I have additional work to get into the flow of the work again. So that's induced work. If work is blocked or interrupted because of an obstacle, because of a quality issue, there's induced work in terms of solving that quality issue. Okay. So the more work is blocked, the more induced work. And then there's an opposite effect. The more induced work that we have, obviously, the less work we can finish, which again weakens our balancing loop. Not only that, there's additional knock-on effects. When we have work in progress, the more work in progress that we have, the more wait time that we have. Because if work is in progress and if we have lots of work in progress, work is waiting. So the length and the variability of our wait time becomes higher. Wait time becomes longer and more variable. Now, if wait times are long and variable, our customer or the person that initiates work may become a little bit impatient and may start to expedite work. So expediting work means that it pushes work on us that we need to do urgently before we continue any other work. Now, expedited work adds to our starting of work, which adds to our work in progress, which will add to our wait time. And so again, we see an additional reinforcing loop. There's still one additional reinforcing loop. The more wait time we have, the more delayed our feedback is. The more delayed our feedback is, the more that problems can pile up. Yeah, the more blocked work that we can have. And again, this reinforces the loop that adds to work in progress. So in the flow lab simulation, so now I'm explaining these causal loops in a rational way in the flow lab simulation. We actually allow people to explore those loops, and it creates with the participants an insight in how all the causal relationships, why work in progress builds up in their system. So the end result is a very unstable way of organizing work. Yeah? So we have long unpredictable lead times, lots of blocked work, lots of expedited work. It explains why the cause of the cause that of why customers put urgent work on top of the team or issue urgent work, expedite work to the team. It puts the cause not with the customer, but the cause within the team. Little collaboration, lots of overburdening. So a very unstable system, and it allows people participants to understand where that instability comes from. Now, so how does the Agile mindset help to remediate that phenomenon? So let's zoom in on flow thinking. And people that are familiar with Kanban understand this. So let's zoom in into flow thinking. What is the effect of flow thinking? Well, flow thinking starts from the observation is in terms of what is the factor here in this little causal loop. What is the factor that we can control? And the factor that we can control is the work in progress. So we can constrain the work in progress. And by constraining the work in progress, we limit the amount of new work that can be started. And so by limiting the amount of new work that can be started, we force the team to start finishing work. Now the netto effect of that, and now we come into the trade-off thinking, and the netto effect of that could be that we can only do that at a lower capacity utilization. So we are trading off WIP for capacity utilization. So our capacity utilization the constraint, we might need to relax our constraint on capacity utilization. So the thinking behind that is that we can do so because of the effect on all the other factors, because we see how this influences the knock-on effects. Yes, we may need to have a lower capacity utilization, but because we have lower WIP, we will have less blocked work, so we will have less induced work, so we can finish more work. Because we have less WIP, we have less wait time, so we will have less expedited work, so again we will start less work, so again this will lead to less WIP. We will have less feedback delay, and because we have less feedback delay, we will have less blocked work. So the reasoning, the lean thinking behind this is, yes, we are trading off some resource efficiency in terms of capacity utilization. We're trading it off for what is called flow efficiency. The work is moving faster through our system, so it's more flowing faster through our system. So that's the lean approach. But still, we might not be happy with the fact that we need to relax our constraints on capacity utilization. We might not be happy with that. So we might want to look at another constraint, which is the division of labor, which is constraining our finishing of work. So that's more the agile thinking. So the agile thinking is, so if we have a strict division of labor, that means that we have many dependencies. Forget the red O on the arrow between division of labor and dependencies for a second. So if we have division of labor, more division of labor, we have more dependencies. If we have more dependencies, we have more process bottlenecks. That means that we can finish less work, because the finishing of work is determined by the bottleneck. And often the fact that we have more bottlenecks also reinforces our division of labor in the traditional mindset. Also, in terms of division of labor, the more we divide the work, the more we have specialization. The more specialization we have, the more knowledge bottlenecks that we have. And obviously, if we have lots of knowledge bottlenecks, that constrains our finishing of work. Again, also that O, for a while, ignore the O on the arrow between specialization and knowledge bottlenecks. So the more knowledge bottlenecks that we have, that constrains our finishing of work. So the agile answer is self-organizing teams, is collaboration. So rather than having division of labor, we have people that collaborate cross-functionally or not cross-functionally, that have a deeper level of collaboration. They finish work together in a collaborative way. So that essentially it's the same loop, but expressed in a more positive way. So the more collaboration that we have, the more the less dependencies that we have, the less dependencies that we have, the less process bottlenecks that we have. So the more work we can finish. The more collaboration that we have, the more knowledge sharing that we have. So rather than specialization, we have people that are not just a specialist, but also have knowledge about in a more general way. So we have generalizing specialists. The more generalizing specialists that we have, the less knowledge bottlenecks that we have, and then as the knowledge bottlenecks that we have, the more we can finish work. So that's the agile thinking. Now, taking a step back, we have through the causal loops, we have shown a little bit of the thinking, the focus of Lean, which is about WIP constraints, flow thinking. We have shown a little bit the focus of Agile, which is about collaboration. But what we also now see is the loop that connects the two loops. The more we constrain the WIP, the more people get idle time that they can use to collaborate. Or even stronger, the more we constrain the WIP, the more people are forced, people in the team are forced to collaborate and to organize themselves. The more collaboration that we have, and that's what we showed in the previous slide, the more collaboration that we have, the more we can finish work, and the more work we can finish, the more we can constrain the WIP. So this is a kind of what you call a meta loop. It's a loop that connects two loops. And what it actually shows is how the flow thinking and self-organization actually can reinforce each other. So this is quite different from the Agile methods thinking, where some Agile methods really focus on WIP constraints, and other Agile methods may focus on collaboration. What the insight here is bringing through the causal loops, what the insight here is bringing is that actually, those two are can reinforce each other, that they're not at odds with each other, that they actually can reinforce each other. Now, from a pragmatic standpoint, how can you use that insight? Well, you can use that insight when you're actually coaching a team or an organization, because this not only applies to the lead team level, but it actually applies to at all levels in the organization. If you're coaching a team of an organization, the question that you need to ask is, in this organization, what is the most controllable factor? Is the most controllable factor the WIP? And then maybe my first change needs to be to further constrain the WIP, and through constraining the WIP, get some collaboration going. Or if the most controllable factor is collaboration, then maybe we need to reinforce the collaboration, and then through that collaboration we can reduce the WIP. So in the case where, for example, you're working with a team that is highly open to working cross-functionally, then you need to emphasize the right-hand side of this slide more. If you're working in a team where you've got lots of specialists that are not so eager to collaborate, then the route through WIP constraints is maybe a better option. So that, I think, illustrates a little bit how we cannot look at Agile practices individually, but that they're forming a system. And then at a high level, if you look at the big themes that Agile brings on the table, flow thinking, self-organization, active learning, that they actually reinforce each other. And going back to the beginning of the presentation, our experience is that it's this type of thinking that can be actually be learned, that can be taught, and that can be coached, and that this really synthesizes Agile thinking, and that thinking can be coached and trained before actually going into the Agile methods. It gives you a foundation on which to start bringing in practices from different Agile methods. Now, as I said, showing and discussing systems diagrams may not be very convincing. It's maybe too rational for something that should be grasped intuitively. So in practice, the way we actually do this is through simulation. So we let people simulate a mechanistic way of organizing work, explore the causal loops, explore what that means in how WIP, work in progress, actually leads to more blocked work, and how that blocked work leads to expediting, that leads to more work in progress. So have people experience that by themselves, try to understand it through the simulation in a safe environment, and then allow people to intervene in there through their understanding of the causal loops, suggests other ways of organizing the work, maybe more agile ways of organizing the work that are representative of their own work situation, and then do safe-to-fail experiments to see how that leads to more agility and maybe more predictability in the work. As I said, this not only applies at the team level, this also applies upstream, downstream, and then also at the enterprise level. So we're pretty convinced that the thinking, the Agile thinking, can be taught through that simulation, through exploring those causal loops before bringing in Agile practices and Agile methods. In practice, this puts the change approach. This brings into light a very different change approach. So how does this work in practice? So I adopted Ash Murray's picture of the customer factory and changed into what we call a change factory. So the overall picture is there's an acquisition process. Now, don't be put off by the word acquisition here. It might be self-selection. It might be voluntary. So acquisition is how do we trigger teams, organizational units to participate in the change, and then we have an activation. The activation is the first experience with the change, and then there's retention, keeping the teams in the change, and then the end result is resilience, is change that demonstrates that teams are bootstrapped and that they're quite resilient, that the change is not leveling off or even regressing, but actually continuing. So looking at that, so how does that work in practice? In a traditional type of change, the practice would be, acquisition would be forcing teams into the change. Activation would be in training them and then coaching them into an agile method. In our case, acquisition means that we expose teams to through simulation to the causal loops, we try to motivate them through a new understanding of how work can be organized. The activation is to explore the causal loops that drive agility in their particular situation. So looking at what the frictions are in their particular situation, and then explore those frictions in a simulation, explore the causal loops that keep those frictions in place, and then see how we can break that. Retention is through cadences and then metrics, fitness for purpose metrics. And then resilience, when to our opinion does the team or the organization shows resilience when they actually acquired by themselves the capabilities, the skills and competencies themselves to train and coach people in the agile thinking. So when they have demonstrated ability to run the simulations by themselves in the organization, so that they don't need a coach to sustain the agile thinking. So that's how it works. It works in practice. So coming back to the title slide. So I want to finish off here. Coming back to the title slide. I strongly believe in teaching and coaching agility. So teaching and coaching the agile thinking. I think thinking about agile practices not as packages that you implement, but rather as a system of practices that are connected with each other, and understanding how they are connected with each other, using that understanding to analyze a certain context, and to form a course of action based on that before going into implementing certain practices. I want to, for those people that are attending Lean Kanban India, I want to invite them if they want to experience that to the flow days that they can experience in the workshop the simulation. For other people, I want to invite to, if you want to learn a little bit more about FlowLab, which is the material that we commercialize to allow people to do those simulations, to explore that a little bit through the link that is shown on the slide. So, so I think I wanna end the presentation here, and then give back the audio to Mahesh.
Thank you, Patrick. Fascinating talk. I think I have not seen a presentation, Patrick, more full of wisdom and little nuggets of insight than, and of course big nuggets too, than this one. And a number of people have been completely floored by your slides, and I've asked for a copy, etc. And thank you to all of the people who have stayed patiently. I know we are running a little late, but those of you who stayed back and heard the complete presentation, thank you for doing that, Patrick. Thanks for your excellent presentation. Let me take up a few questions. I know we are already late, but let me take a few questions, and I am not sure I will do justice to the question given the sort of deep nature of the topic and some of the slides that you presented, Patrick. So if needed, I'm going to enable audio for the people who asked the question, and hopefully we can still answer a few questions before we wind up for the day. So Patrick, let me take a few, let me share a couple of comments. Some people loved your, and so did I, the quote from the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, brought back some old memories. Let me take a question or two. Firstly, I guess there's a question from Joseph Howry. by giving an example, what is the difference between an output and an outcome? That is one of your slides, I think early slides about, yeah, so if you could go ahead and
yeah, so that's a good question. So it's in one of the core slides, I think. Yeah. So many people have, especially in the context of lean UX, lean startup, people have been making that distinction between outputs and outcomes. So if you're in the business of developing software, then you might consider your primary result an output. But if you're in the business of business, you might not be happy with just an output, with a deliverable, a piece of software that you deliver. You are mainly interested in terms of what is the result of delivering that output. So what are the outcomes in terms of customers that are buying your product? If you're thinking about a web product, in terms of people getting to know your product, then actually showing interest, committing to your product. So it's about the business results. That's what we mean with outcomes. Now, in terms of change, we can also make that distinction. If we have a change that we're implementing, we're not just interested in outputs. So I've been involved in a couple of changes where the evaluation of the change was in terms of how many teams are doing a daily stand-up, and is the daily stand-up longer or shorter than 15 minutes. That's an output. What we're in terms of change, we're interested in outcomes. We're interested in, does it reduce our delivery time? Does it reduce our lead time? And obviously, ultimately, are we, to use David Anderson's words, are we fitter for purpose in terms of surviving in the business, in the market?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to just remind the audience, those of you who are still here, and if you have a question, you can certainly use the Q&A box on the right side of your screens and ask a question. So Patrick, here's a question from Brett Ainsley. Brett's question was, we're wondering if work is blocked, is it not better to swarm on other work in progress rather than starting it? How would that work in the flow?
Oh, yeah. So true. Yeah. So if work is blocked, let me show the diagram here. If work is blocked, then obviously it is better to swarm on other work. Yeah. Now, if your mindset is a mechanistic mindset, if your mindset is a very traditional way of organizing work, then you'll see all kinds of obstacles why that wouldn't be possible to swarm on other work. You might see obstacles in terms of, yeah, but I might not be the specialist, or I might not have the competencies to actually help with that other work. So this notion of division of labor, which is about specializing work, creating people that are specialists so that they're more efficient in doing a certain task, actually constrains that type of thinking. Now, for people that are quite experienced with Agile, they know that, they understand that collaboration actually is the better option. But for people that are less experienced with Agile, they might see quite some constraints in terms of division of labor, in terms of, well, that's not my task. Well, I don't have the skills to perform that task. So there might be a constraint in terms of finishing works through that swarming. Now, and it's quite understandable at the team level, but often we see that type of thinking also at a bigger level, and then at a high level, when we're talking about teams, multiple teams that need to collaborate, and then that the notion of swarming of work even becomes even more difficult to get people convinced that it's better to collaborate to finish work rather than to stick to the division of labor and start the work.
Right.
So there's all kinds of constraints.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me take on a couple of more questions. I know again we are late. So there's a question from Gail McAuliffe. Gail's question was related to your slide on the specialization versus generalized specialists, as you put it, I think. The question was, what if you work with a team where specialization is needed? For example, data architects don't write ETL.
Yes.
How do you deal with those situations?
Exactly. And I think that exactly shows the dilemma that we are in. So in some teams it's really quite a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer to say, like, yeah, when we're blocked, we swarm on work because we can collaborate. In other teams, there's all kinds of constraints that hamper the team to start collaborating. Yeah, because you have specialists. And so if you're starting from an agile method, depending on the agile method that you're starting from, your right answer might be different. So if you're starting from one method, the answer might be yes, but you need cross-functional collaboration, and it's almost dogmatic that people need to collaborate cross-functionally, and then you ignore the constraint of specialization. Or if you're starting from another method, the answer might be yes. So it's all about taking into account that the reality of specialization and dealing with that, managing that. So I think that's kind of core. So kind of core is when yes, some teams there's quite some constraints. Specialization is built into the team, and the route to follow is flow thinking. The route to follow is managing the work in progress in those teams, constraining the work in progress, and then through constraining the work in progress, get more flow into the work. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking for opportunities for collaboration. And then the constraining the work in progress actually creates opportunities for collaboration, because the team needs to collaborate to keep the work in progress within the work in progress constraint. So it's a way of gradually increasing the level of collaboration within the team.
Right. Makes sense. Excellent. I think probably this might have to be the last question. It's, I think, also a fairly detailed question. Let me go ahead and ask the question from Greg Manto. For the coaching scenario of we are coaching executives, leaders, and managers, what aspects of information and approach you've shared could you start with? And then how might you assess progress or value add from starting from there? Okay. So we've had really good experiences with having a cross-section of an organization, a cross-section across the different levels of the organization, participating in a flow lab type of simulation where they experience the flow thinking, they experience agility,
through that simulation. We really had a good experience with that because it is method neutral, because it's not about a particular method, but because it's about getting the thinking going of a different way of managing periods. So it gets the thinking going at all levels of the organization, and the added value is that all levels of the organization can actually recognize themselves in that simulation. They understand, each of them understands simulation in their own way. So if you're starting from an agile method, then it might be the case that let's say management says like, yeah, but that's a development method, so that applies to our development teams. So that's the risk of starting from a method. Now, if you're starting from agility and starting through simulation, letting people experience agility, then they recognize that it also applies to their own work, and it applies to the way they manage the work of others. Management manages the work of others. So the added value is that it actually has a value that it actually creates a deeper understanding for everybody that is involved across the entire organization. Does that make sense?
Right. Hopefully, Greg, you got the answer you're looking for. I'd certainly encourage you to follow up with Patrick with any other aspects of your question. I think we are getting to the top of the hour here, so I'm going to have to. Okay, let me just take up a follow-up comment from Greg. He says that regarding added value, I was actually seeking how to assess that value add, but of course he appreciates our answer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, and then we're getting into how do you measure outcomes?
Right.
So I think that's a whole topic on itself.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I'll certainly so you'll have Greg's contact, and we can have a follow-up conversation. So let me close here, Patrick. Thank you again for a really interesting talk, and I think especially for coaches and trainers and consultants, invaluable, because these are exactly the challenges that they face. Some of these are things that I think we all cause ourselves. Like you said, it is one of the biggest challenges of implementing agility is implementing an agile method, and that becomes by itself the starting point for all kinds of problems. And I think you really put a nice framework to think about that. And of course, if those of you who have not attended Patrick's session on Flow Labs, and definitely encourage all of you to try and attend the one that's closest to you. Like Patrick said, we have Lean Kanban India coming up. I know that some of you who are on this conference today are going to be in India, and if you haven't signed up for Patrick's workshop, please go ahead and do so immediately. It's too bad, Patrick, that I will not be able to do that this time. Really thought-provoking presentation, as someone just said, Greg. I think we will make the recording of this webinar available after this session, probably in a day or two, in a follow-up email. And of course, we encourage you to reach out to us or Patrick, of course, for any follow-up comments, questions, thoughts that you all have. So Patrick, with that, any final closing thoughts?
Well, thank you for organizing. It was a real pleasure for me.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, and thank you all to the audience, especially for coming and joining. We had one of the largest audiences in all of our webinars that we do. Thank you for staying back till the end. We are going to have a webinar by David Anderson in September, and I welcome all of you to join that as well. We'll be sending out the invitations for that shortly. And if any of you are looking at any kind of tooling help or other training help at Digite, we are available for that as well. Patrick, thank you very much. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the day or evening, depending on where you are. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye.